Warning: the following audio may contain coarse language, as well as discussion of material that may not be suitable for younger audiences. Listener discretion is advised. Also, we may spoil just about anything that pops into our heads. We hope you enjoy. Hey there, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Understated Thoughts podcast. My name is William, and just like last time, I am joined by my good friend Tom.
Hello, William.
Hello, Tom. And making his premiere on our podcast, his very first time appearing, everything in his life has been building up to this one moment. All the blood, sweat, and tears that he's had to endure through all of those trials and tribulations of life, they're finally paying off. Nick.
Hi, Nick.
It was not hyperbolic. It is 100% accurate.
Perfect. All right. So today, just like Tom and I said at the end of the last episode of the podcast, we're going to be talking about some more horror-oriented flicks in honor of Halloween. Again, we didn't do it on Friday the 13th because we can't plan for shit. So let's just dive right into our first movie of the night, the original 1978 Halloween by John Carpenter.
No. This is John Carpenter's Halloween.
How
you have to remember.
You.
You will know whose movie it is by John Carpenter.
Yeah, Mike. It says prominently like John Carpenter's Halloween, but doesn't
no one calls it John Carpenter.
No one calls it John Carpenter's Halloween nowadays.
John Carpenter probably does.
Well,
it's a third person.
He's too cool.
Hey, did you guys watch John Carpenter's Halloween? You mean your Halloween? No, John Carpenter's Halloween.
My introduction to John Carpenter's Halloween, first of all, it was in high school, in early high school. I was like maybe ninth grade. And I had only known of Halloween by the theme music because I had a friend that played it on piano. And I was like, oh, who's that written by? He was like, oh yeah, it's John Carpenter, and it's like Halloween. So then I watched the movie, and I was like, why did they have the composer's name on the title? Oh, they really love the music.
John Carpenter actually did do a lot of his own music.
He did.
Movies, though.
It's part of the reason.
He doesn't list himself as composing a lot of the music, though. He often has other people. It's kind of pseudonyms and stuff, and I think he did that with this one as well.
Yeah, I seem to recall that he did that, too. I mean, on the one hand, it did teach me how to learn how to count in 5, because the theme is in 5/4. But anyway, Tom, aren't you so glad you're doing this with music nerds?
Absolutely, and it's a beautiful little underscored score for this movie. It's simple. It's got kind of a Jaws repetition to it, and it does intensify the creepy factor by just being a piano instead of a full orchestra behind it to kind of give it that bombastic horror feel. And it's just it's a little creepy.
Oh my god, could you imagine instead of piano they did it with oboe or something like that? Ugh.
You need a good tuba in there. I wonder if you could get a tuba for that kind of thing.
Get a Glock.
But then Michael Myers has to be really fat.
Yeah.
Yep.
But this movie, though, I mean, sort of swinging this back on track.
Yeah.
Sort of. It really was one of the first slasher flicks that ever came out. I mean, Hitchcock sort of originated the genre back with Psycho, with it's a fitting legacy since that was Janet Leigh, and Jamie Lee Curtis, her daughter, wound up in Halloween to continue on the legacy. And the only thing really in between that you could consider a slasher movie was Black Christmas.
Oh yeah, with Olivia Hussey from the Zeffirelli Romeo and Juliet.
So which was a slasher film, but it's I guess unless you're really a horror nerd, not nerd but aficionado, for lack of a better word. It really isn't known as quite as well as the Halloween.
No,
especially the entire series,
No. Well, also just because Michael Myers has become such a such a staple of the slasher genre with just his Shatner mask and his jumpsuit that he stole from
The
like a janitor.
beautiful Shatner mask, which was nice because they left a lot of it in shadow too, so you really couldn't tell what it was. And this movie has a lot of shadow. It's the cinematography for it. I mean, Carpenter makes use of a lot of like negative space and a lot of just dark in the thing. So what lights up is, you know, exactly what he wants you to see on screen, which helps hide the characters in the off frame.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
But
you
then,
look like you want to say something.
but it's just going off of what you said. It's sort of in an opposite way. All of the scenes that he uses towards the beginning of the movie, which are very well lit by natural light, because a lot of that outside, a lot of the long pan shots of the roads in Haddonfield.
Haddonfield. Yep.
Haddonfield,
Okay.
Yep. Illinois, I think.
I think so. Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah, and it was interesting because those shots, whenever Michael would appear, like it would be from a distance, but like well lit. Which, I mean, for me, I guess when I think of slasher movies and like all the death scenes, it's always dark, and you never really get a full view like of the monster or whatever thing hunting people. But you would see an entire like a full shot of Michael, like in daylight.
Yeah,
which I found
they don't show his face off very much. Even at the long shots, you can't tell what it is, and then the dark shot, it's half in shadow.
Yeah.
So that
I mean, you get a feel for Carpenter's style with shooting it. To me, at least, the first real time that it happens is when Laurie Strode and her two friends are walking along the sidewalk, and you see Michael right along that line of hedges. Like, you can clearly tell that it's him. But at the same time, it's just far away enough where you can't fully make out his, like, either facial features or even his full figure, because a part of it is still obscured by the hedges. So Carpenter, what he does so well is that he only uses the really close, intimate shots for the moments when, like, the tension is particularly high. So, like, for example, in the closet, when she tries locking herself in and Michael almost barges himself in. So, like, Carpenter's use of space and just distance, just from our perspective, is really nice, and sort of even just giving this sense that something is just off about whatever this guy is that's creeping out by the hedges and by the laundry in that one shot of when they're in the house.
Right, and Carpenter, or at least the psychiatrist there in the movie, Loomis, mentions it. He calls Michael an it, and that was essentially Carpenter's idea for Michael, is that he was the shape. He wasn't really, he was supposed to be this inhuman presence as opposed to an actual person stalking these things. He was more of just a force of nature, and it works for him, especially in these shots, because it never really humanizes Michael at all throughout this movie.
I have a question related to this, and this is just on its question, because this time that I watched the movie, Loomis says that he's been working with Michael for 15 years.
Yeah.
And that the crime happened when he killed his sister when he was a kid. He was 6.
Something like that, yeah, like 5 or 6.
I for whatever reason, when I watched it this time, I put 2 and 2 together. I was like, oh my gosh, he's 21 years old.
Yeah, like this is a guy who has spent his entire preteen and adolescent life and young adult life in an asylum, just being studied as this fascinating object by this balding guy.
And I thought it was neat that they justified him being able to drive the car off in the beginning. She yells at him. It was like, he can't drive a car. He's like, well, he looks like he was doing a pretty good job.
I love that. I just love how sometimes it's like just covering your own ass with that kind of stuff. I love that so much.
And so, I mean, he mentions like maybe somebody was giving him lessons or something. So it could be that somebody in this mental institute was trying to reach out to him and kind of humanize him and bring a thing, and unintentionally taught him this skill that he uses to get away, and this very highly conspicuous '70s station wagon with the mental institute's signal on the side of it, which I'm gonna jump right to the end of the movie. But how did the doctor not notice that thing parked across the street from him all night?
I have
I,
no idea. I
he's
just
sitting
don't
there
know.
sitting outside Myers' house pretty much all night waiting for him to show up. The sheriff comes along, talks to him for a little bit, and they walk away, and he looks across the street, and there's the station wagon parked there. How did you miss it? How long were you sitting there? That's the only one part of this movie that having it on the rewatch
Yeah.
really bugged me.
See, I have a theory to that because
Oh, really? I got to hear this.
Please.
no, because I marked down specifically when he was creeping outside of the Myers house and the kids come up, and then he's like, "Hey, kids, get away from there!" in like a spooky voice or whatever, and they run away. And he has this look of pure elation on his face, like this smug grin. And I was like, Dr. Loomis, you really did that, didn't you? And he was just so busy spooking kids that he just didn't pay attention to the station wagon outside.
I
guess
guess he was
situational
This
blindness, yeah.
artificial, like image that I saw, like, why is this actor making that face at that time? It's not spooky. It's not like scary. It's like
No,
don't know.
I feel you. Maybe going off of your theory, maybe he was just so happy about the fact that he saved these two kids' lives that he's like, I'm gonna. Maybe he left to go get himself a drink, and there was like a gigantic span of time where he's like, oh wait a minute, I have to go watch the house.
There's yeah, there's really no way to justify that one, I guess.
No. I mean,
But,
Donald Pleasance was great in the movie otherwise, so as far as I'm
Oh,
concerned,
absolutely.
he can get away with a little bit of self-indulgent acting, I guess.
There were a bunch of parts in this movie. I mean, for things that are happening behind the actors, though. I mean, there was a lot of moments where the camera is focused on somebody in the foreground, and what is the important stuff in the scene is happening in the background of this. Like you have when he's standing outside the little diner there waiting for the cop to come back, and Myers drives by him in the background.
I loved that. That was so great.
You know, it doesn't feel unnatural, like he could have missed like
Yeah.
somebody walking past behind him, and you know how they always turn around too late. It's a normal road. There's cars driving by. He's just not paying attention to traffic at that point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then later in the
That's-
movie, when Curtis is kind of crying up against the wall, and then you've got Myers behind her, kind of rising back up after she stabbed him in the face.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it uses a lot of the entire screen as opposed to just focusing on one actor at a time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think back then there was a lot more trust on the filmmakers and like everyone involved in the production. There was a lot more trust in the viewer's ability to catch things. Things didn't have to be as spelt out. They could just kind of subtly happen in the background like they normally would. I mean, there are a lot of scenes where Michael is actually in the shot and you just don't see him because he's just chilling in the shadows.
Yeah.
And like it's trusting people who are watching the movie that they are going to notice these things, as opposed to like the kind of twists that they're preparing in like more modern horror movies where they make it so obvious that it's like you couldn't assume that the audience has a certain base level of like observation skills.
No, I feel what you mean, because and this is one of the reasons why I generally tend to prefer horror films that are much more about building tense atmosphere as opposed to like actually trying to scare you with like the imagery, like the things that you're actually seeing, like maybe as far as the plot is concerned, like stabbings or things like that. Because when a movie has a tense atmosphere, like a really tense atmosphere that you feel, that's when you know that like everything about the shot or the scene in question just makes you feel so uncomfortable. So when you actually do take the time to do that level of observation, you're able to pinpoint, oh, so that's why that was so creepy, or so that's why I felt so uncomfortable with like that one little region of the screen. Like Carpenter's setting up of shots in Halloween is operating on a level that all of its imitators, like Friday the 13th, just simply couldn't do because they didn't like get that element of the movie. At least
No,
that's what I thought.
it's they spend the first hour of the movie, as opposed to a lot of the slasher films and stuff that came after it, building tension for this thing. I mean, you get to kind of know the characters a little bit, mostly Curtis's character there, Laurie. I mean, there was a couple other ones that were pretty superficial and really didn't have any character development by other than, hey, this is a person that's going to wind up dead later. Like they're like this one the one girl's boyfriend Paul never. I don't think he ever shows up in the movie, but they keep mentioning him.
Yeah, I think
You know,
I think
so
you're right. Yeah,
they're building a little bit of he's world building for the first hour of this movie and slowly building tension. So when the jump scares do come, he uses them to maximum effectiveness, as opposed to trying to, jump scare through the entire movie. So by the end of the final third of the movie, you've become so jaded to them that you're not scared of them anymore, and they've got to ramp up the action and stuff, as opposed to this is where the tension started building off.
yeah. It happens in such controlled doses that when they do happen, it's rare and it's all the more jarring when they do.
Exactly. And I don't. You've seen the remake of it, Zombies version of it.
Yep.
I'm going to judge by the eye roll that your opinion of this of the remake was not nearly on par as to the original. I have not actually seen it myself, and I really felt like I should have before bringing it up. But comparatively speaking, which would you prefer as in terms of how it was made?
Is that even a question?
John Carpenter, 100%.
Yeah, not even close.
But
I didn't think so, but I felt like at the very least, if a movie has a remake to it, we can mention it.
Yeah.
Well,
even if it's terrible.
I did. I put it in my notes, like just I was going to inevitably bring up the reboot. I'm surprised that you did it before me. And like you have seen it, Will?
I have, yeah.
Okay, because like it had so much potential.
It really did.
To be good. Like,
yeah.
The concept of where they started, where they actually like looked into the background of Michael's childhood, the period of 15 years between the murder and and him escaping the asylum, and like that part for me, I was in the movie for that bit. Like that was like, oh, this is really original, and it goes into more of the relationship between him and the doctor. It humanized it. Like I did want to say, like, of the reboot, one of the best things is the fact that they had Malcolm McDowell as Loomis.
Amen.
Like, I was very happy with that casting choice, and
Absolutely.
he was able to put more human quality to the role.
Yeah. Well,
and like the relationship between him and Michael, whereas like this one, it was very stark. We are establishing a slasher movie, and this guy is a monster. There is no humanity in him. Where they were at least willing to explore that idea in the remake. And the only other element that I could allude to is the fact that in the remake, Michael brings Laurie to their house.
Yeah.
And like he has a grave set up and he hands her a picture and he has his mask off. Like that's another like a very powerful kind of scene and an interesting take of how to tell the story. Again, adding more human elements to it.
I think he did that based off of the sequel, knowing that the sequel made Laurie Meyer's sister or stepsister. Yeah. I forget exactly which it was, but it when it was originally conceived, I don't think she was conceived as his sister.
No, she wasn't.
In the original, so that for that part anyway, it dehumanizes him again because he gives really no motivation for hunting down these people. Yeah, other than he just decided to go home and start the killing.
Yeah, I mean, I seem to remember that there was some kind of interview that Carpenter gave where he was because for those who don't know, Carpenter did not intend for Halloween to become solely like about Michael Myers. He actually intended to envision it more as an anthology series of horror stories as opposed to just this basically slasher franchise. But he said when he was approached by studios to make Halloween 2, I think he said, and if I can find the clip, I'll share it with you guys at some point in the future. I think he said he had to write some kind of aspect to sort of make the sequel more compelling. I think he said, I was just sitting with a six pack, and it's like him, like Laurie and Michael being related was what I thought of, which is
It sounds like the idea you think of when you're drunk. I got nothing.
I got
Make him
nothing.
say he just watched Star Wars, or well,
I was just thinking that.
the original came out just after the first Star Wars, so they're not related.
Yeah.
And the second one came after Empire Strikes Back, so they are related.
See, this is actually just a retelling of the archetypal hero story of in mythology, just through the lens of Michael Myers.
Mhm.
Actually thought of this as almost like a sort of like a new wave postmodern horror movie. It,
Yeah.
it uses a lot of imagery from like the French New Wave, kind of the limited use of lighting, the natural lighting for
Mhm.
the things, and the limited use of things on screen to more point towards the actors. It almost seems like it was almost envisioned as like an indie, you know, art film more than anything else.
Well, it was an indie film. I mean, it was released independently, and that's part of the reason why he was approached to make a sequel, was because it had a budget of, I think, less than $500,000, and it made like 44 some million at the box office because people just couldn't get enough of it. But going back to what you said about how, like using, like sometimes minimizing what's on the screen just for effect, the scene that really sticks out in my mind when you brought that up was in the opening, after he puts the mask on, and then all you see is just through the eyes of the mask. And I mean, because you don't actually see, the knife that he uses to stab his older sister in the beginning. You don't actually see it enter her body. He actually looks up at it so that you can see he's moving it. But just this whole entire idea of like the space that you see being restricted, and in the entire opening sequence, which gives the feeling that you're kind of floating, so as opposed to actually walking. It just does such a brilliant job right at the beginning of creating this very uneasy sense and this very uneasy space that just permeates the whole thing.
And it does. And for speaking of the stabbing there, for a slasher movie, there's surprisingly little gore in this movie. The closest thing I can think is when the girl there is getting strangled in the car, and he slashes her throat, and that's about the closest that it comes to actually an on screen knife kill
Yeah, I
to
mean,
this entire movie. I mean, even the boyfriend that gets pinned to the wall later
yeah.
is off screen.
You just hear the crunch, and I mean that's all you need. And actually, one thing I love about that is that after it's done, he's been dead for a couple of minutes. You see Michael sort of do this weird head tilt, almost
Like he's
like an art
admiring his
connoisseur
work.
admiring a painting and hanging in, like, just to throw out a reference, like the Everson Museum or something like that.
Dude, this belongs in a museum. So do you.
I did a good.
But yeah, the only other thing I could think, that was really effectively used in this movie was the soundtrack. Going back to that, everything in the movie was the piano score, mostly up until the one scene where they're driving around and they've got Blue Oyster Cult on the radio while Myers is sitting there tailing them. They've got Don't Fear the Reaper playing on the radio, and it's such an effective use of music
Mm-hmm.
on the movie. It kind of sets up the entire thing for the rest of the movie.
Mm-hmm.
Is Laurie's sort of journey into the scared babysitter into sort of the action girl by
Yeah.
the end.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, with Laurie, and talking about music again, when she in that scene when she locks herself in the closet, it starts with that little, like, dun 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 over it, and just as that scene goes on, and as Michael gets closer and closer to possibly killing her, Carpenter just keeps adding these small, repeating layers over and over and over again, and I wasn't really aware of that until I watched it this time again. Just how much he's able to use the extremes of instrument ranges to try and sort of create this weird like pull, this weird struggle, even musically, as she's wrestling to get the hanger to stab him in the eye. Um, so I mean, this is a great movie.
It really is. It's become a classic for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
It's moved beyond cult classic status. I don't even know if it wasn't when it was originally run, but it's just been released, re-released so many different times that this movie has entered, pop culture. Even if you haven't seen it, you know of it,
Mm-hmm.
and you know all about Michael Myers from everything else.
Mm-hmm.
Or you've seen like the films that nowadays are emulating things that you see in this version. Like a lot of the slasher films that followed did a lot of the same kind of cinematography tricks that Carpenter incorporated here, especially regarding like long shots.
Mm-hmm.
And like especially with the audio use for scares, like using the audio to enhance a scare. I mean, heck, you could even technically trace the beginnings of like the Inception Wham to this movie, because like when someone finally got it, just a bomb. And I literally just wrote down in my notes, blah.
That's awesome. Yeah, there's one last little audio thing that I want to talk about before we either move on to something else or keep talking about Halloween. But it's at the very end after Loomis looks down and Michael's not there, and it does that weird so those weird stills of all the previous locations that we see, and you just hear Michael's deep breathing.
The Darth Vader breath. Yeah.
I'm just like, that is so creepy. Because it gives a feeling like he's still out there, and he could be in any of these places, and because the breathing is so pronounced, it's like, he could be, like, right next to you. And I'm just like, wow. That's so creepy.
That was very effective. I don't know if you noticed, it does do that through a lot of the movies, especially, or a lot of the other scenes that Michael is in, especially the ones where it's kind of not quite from his point of view, but like looking over his shoulder or just behind him when he's like steps onto the screen, but he's not the main focus.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, no, it's you're right. It's a great use of a sound effect just to heighten the creepiness factor of it.
Mm-hmm. Alrighty, so is there anything else about Halloween that anybody wanted to talk about, or shall we move on to Event Horizon?
Let's move on to Event Horizon. This is one
Horizon.
it's not seen by a whole lot of people. This is kind of a cult film. And this was my pick of the three that we did, so I will take full responsibility for subjecting the two of you to this movie. Our original pick was going to be John Carpenter's The Thing, which briefly focuses in Halloween,
Mm-hmm.
which would have been a great setup, but unfortunately not all of us could find it to watch it. So we moved on to Event Horizon, which came out in 1995, was directed by Paul Anderson.
Mm-hmm.
Also the guy that made Mortal Kombat, if you guys need a reference.
Cinematic.
and the Resident Evil movies. So this is kind of what he did in between projects. Yeah. This was in between the video game movies.
We're talking about a sterling reputation for a director here.
Great reputation already. So this is one of those little cult movies. It was weirdly, it was lambasted by the critics, didn't do very well in the box office, and then for some reason got picked up as a cult movie on video afterwards by some of the strangest fandoms, as that they latched onto this movie as part of their own. Especially Warhammer 40,000. They see it as kind of an unofficial prequel to their universe, because it fits exactly into the entire reason that universe exists.
The hell, man. The hell.
So, Since I was the one that subjected the pair of you to this, since neither of you had seen this before, let's hear your thoughts first.
Okay, so before going into this, because I do reference this a lot in like just what I was writing down, and I wrote a lot more down for this one than Halloween, admittedly. Um, but have either of you seen? I think it was a 2008 or 2009 movie. It was called Sunshine.
Yes.
Okay,
I have not actually, no.
okay, just because, much to my begrudgingly acceptance, I found a lot of parallels between this movie and Sunshine.
That's totally fine. I mean, there's a disclaimer that says we may spoil everything, so you can spoil whatever the heck you want. I won't
Well,
care.
no,
But
it's
the
not
best way
spoil-
I
it's more
describe
so
this
just
movie,
spoiling myself because I love Sunshine.
that is a great movie. It really is.
It is a fantastic movie, and I'm sorry to say, is much better produced and like a better product than Event Horizon.
I'm not going to argue with that either.
Yeah. Now,
But it wasn't. But Sunshine wasn't pure horror, so it wasn't. It was. I couldn't
That's the
recommend it for a Halloween movie.
yeah, it turned into horror, but it was like that. It was more so. Well, first off, it was more so based in science. Like Sunshine, I first saw it because my high school AP physics teacher had us watch this movie purely because it's one of the few like sci-fi fantasy thriller movies that actually has a lot of the shit correct. I don't know how much of this stuff is
Surprisingly, this is. I'm gonna jump in on you here onto
Go
your
for it.
thoughts here.
I want
Um,
to know.
the best way I can describe this movie to people is it's Alien meets Hellraiser in space.
Yeah, I can see that.
So, but this is a movie that had a lot of high concepts to it. They really do get a lot of the physics right and a lot of the ideas about space right too. And, you get the things, just the little nuances. Like a lot of the like sci-fi writers, they don't really have a tendency to have scale for things. They're like, oh, it's 1,000,000 miles to somewhere. He mentions that it's 3 billion miles to the nearest outpost, which would put it right around Saturn on one of the moons. So it's a feasible statement for him to say. Even the little insignias and the emblems they're wearing, like the flags, you don't really notice them very much. But the couple of them that are American have flags that have 52 stars on them.
Mm-hmm.
Like something had gotten added to the thing as the future is going along. America probably finally adopted Puerto Rico and who knows what else as the 50 couple of states.
Like DC, Guam, Samoa,
Yeah, and so it's a movie that it takes its time with the details on things, and it really wanted to be so much more than it ended up as.
That was basically my impression too. I just I got because I didn't. For me, I didn't like it, but I didn't hate it. It sort of fell into that nebulous space where it's like, it's okay. I mean, it's not hurting anyone.
And just to interject, I'm not saying I hate it.
Yeah.
I'm just like,
Yeah.
It's all in perspective.
Yeah.
And like, it was so bizarre watching this movie because it would have moments where everything was like going well. They constructed they scaffolded a scene to have like the right kind of tension build up. It's great. And it seemed like those moments and those like crowning like, oh, this was enjoyable to watch, like these portions, they became farther and fewer between as the movie went on. And just there would be something that just derails it.
Yeah.
Like things said, a way a line is delivered, or like something plot related happening that would just like take you out of it. It just sucked me out of that moment.
Yeah, like just sorry to cut you off, but like one of the first moments that I felt where that happened was when he's trying to sort of explain when the Dr. Weir is trying to explain just sort of what happened with Event Horizon, and everybody keeps interrupting him. It's just like, come on, like we're in Exposition City right now, and he's the mayor. You gotta give him his, like, just 1 minute to just sort of get all of the stuff out of the way so that way we can sort of get a feel of what's trying to go on. And everybody's making all of these snide, sarcastic remarks, and I'm just like, could you all just shut up?
That's one thing that reminded me about Alien a lot is that like in Alien, the Ridley Scott let all the actors more or less talk over each other the entire time, just about what we're doing here to each other sometimes.
Yeah.
But so it kind of flows off of the same aesthetic as, everybody's chiming in at this round table sort of conference about what's going on, and yeah, it does create kind of a chaotic environment, but at the same time, to me, it made it almost a little more of a realistic moment because it's an informal briefing on this thing, and everybody's incredulous about this guy that's more or less just taken physics and thrown them right out the window. They all want to chime in with their 2 cents. They're like, no, you can't do that. They're like, what are you thinking? He's trying to explain it, and they're all like, you're mad. You're a mad scientist. Why are you doing this to us?
See, I actually enjoyed this scene because I wanted them to keep giving him shit. I hated him from the moment he was on.
I hated everyone in this movie. No, except for the black guy. I liked him in this movie. He was funny.
Which one? Oh,
Cooper, I think is his name.
Spaceman, yeah. Funky Spaceman.
Funky Spaceman. Yeah.
I called him that throughout this entire my entire note taking. I always called him Funky Spaceman.
And when he's trying to get back to the event horizon after the Lewis and Clark blows up, and he's trying to figure it out, and then he ejects his oxygen or something like that. He's like, "I'm coming, motherfucker."
See, those are the moments I'm referring to that just take you out of it.
I liked that. See, I liked that. I liked that a lot. I thought it was funny.
It does have those moments, and it has some weirdly darkly comic moments in it too. Like after they get the end of the transmission, and they finally actually get to visually see what happened to the other crew, and the captain's just like, we're leaving. He's just like, I mean, they write the characters so they're not entirely unintelligent like a lot of the horror movies do.
Because sometimes. Yeah.
They try to make smart decisions in this, and then it really is, if you look at it from the perspective that the ship is alive and it's really messing with our heads, that's where the really dumb decisions come in. Yeah. Especially the one woman that starts chasing her kid around at the end.
Oh my god.
It gives you that visual though. That one split moment of visual where the globe is reflected in her eye. Mm-hmm. And you can see it's taken over. It's given her something to chase.
I was almost literally yelling at the TV, "What the hell are you doing? You are getting out of here. You have the chance to leave, and you are chasing after something that you know is probably not really there, and is probably going to kill you."
Exactly.
These are the 2 things I wrote down. First, don't stop walking away, and immediately below that, you dumb bitch.
It's not inaccurate. But like I say, the entire point, the entire movie, for me anyway, it's a good slow creep towards a lot of the deaths. I mean, it's got a very good atmosphere, set design, and like the ship itself. They took a model of Notre Dame and reassembled it to build this ship. Mm-hmm. So a lot of the Gothic architecture you're seeing in this ship for no apparent reason is because it's there for no apparent reason.
Well, I also just loved it's another one of those my god, how stupid can you be moments when that one lady is explaining to Captain Miller sort of the explanation for what the heck is going on, and it's like when she's saying, "No, I think the ship is alive," and he's basically dismissing it outright, like, "That's stupid, that could never happen." It's like, okay, you're talking about a guy who has bent the laws of physics basically to just completely mess everything up, but that's something that's completely ridiculous. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm not you.
I felt at that moment like he didn't want to believe it. It was kind of one of those moments like if he accepted that, then he was accepting defeat. I mean, how do you kill a living starship that is actively trying to kill you?
You blow it up.
And you can't leave because your own starship is currently in disrepair.
Mm-hmm.
So,
see, I actually have a question for the both of you that I thought of this as like a talking point just in case if any point in the podcast if there was a lull. What, as you were watching this movie, what were your like theories about what was happening? Because like when I watch a movie, and this was essentially instilled by my mother because she does the exact same thing when we're watching it, like a mystery or like a who done it bit or like what is going on like type of movie, we actively try
To
to
solve it.
figure like to predict it, like
Yeah.
where it's like, oh, it's probably this, or like we will effectively like ruin the movie for someone who just wants to watch it because we will talk about like whatever. And I'm interested to see like what were your theories, like what were those ideas popping into your head if you do the same thing.
Yeah. Well,
Like what do you
because
think it was?
I had a strong inkling that the ship was alive the moment that it sort of does that weird Battlefield Earth style tilted shot of Weir in the chair, and then he's like, "Open the door." I'm like, "Well, okay." And now,
Oh, you mean when the thing is slamming outside the door and like literally trying to punch through the door?
yeah, that was the moment I
Like
realized.
chasing him?
That was the moment that I realized, oh, there's no monster in this. It's just either Weir's in charge of everything, or the ship is alive somehow and is actively trying to kill them.
The moment I kind of got the impression of that was, if I remember right, the first time of watching it, when they do a scan of the bio signs on it, and she can't get a solid reading. The whole ship is essentially alive.
Hmm.
At that point, I had seen enough sci-fi and
Yeah.
stuff to like, okay, something's off about the ship itself.
Hmm.
But then when no monster or anything started showing up, and they start getting these, hallucinations, these really creepy vibes from the thing, you start getting the idea that it's the environment that's actively hostile as opposed to any one thing in particular.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
will, yeah, because I've watched a lot of Star Trek, and if there's one thing that I've learned from watching a lot of Star Trek, it's that the ship is just as evil as any alien you could possibly encounter.
It's an entirely other character in itself. It is this movie's Michael Myers,
Essentially.
essentially.
Well,
But
it would appear that I am the odd man out here because I did not at any point think that the ship was alive, and like so I apparently wasn't picking up on that. But you both like provided a list of reasons that I'm thinking to myself, wow, I really didn't know.
how did I miss that?
How did I miss that?
There's a lot of a lot of things about this movie that it really had the potential to be so much more.
It
And
really
one of the
did.
one of the big things, that a lot of fans of the movie really wish that they could restore is that almost half an hour of this movie was cut
Yeah, I read about
by
that, and apparently, like, it's been like lost forever or something like that.
it got lost for years and years, and I think they finally ran across it back around in like somewhere around 2010, 2013, somewhere in between that era. But it had the one surviving copy of it had gotten stored in a vault, like a salt vault in Transylvania, and it had gotten so degraded that they couldn't restore it to DVD or Blu-ray quality for it. It was just very, very degraded.
When you said
And
Transylvania, I thought to myself, how on earth is it Transylvania? And then I realized it's Event Horizon, so that's like par for the course.
exactly. That was what everybody else said too. They're like, it fits. For some reason, it fits. But so there's a lot of this movie, and the reason it had gotten cut was apparently it was so disturbing that the test screenings, people were getting nauseous. They were fainting. They were just up and walking out
I gotta
of
see
this thing.
this.
It was. Yeah,
See,
that's the thing. I was like, you saw the brief glimpses, like when they flash to the crew when they're after they're dead, they're in hell, they're getting tormented. Even like the one scene where they see the transmission from the other crew. These scenes were more extensive and apparently scattered more throughout the film to create a more horrific atmosphere, and they had to cut them out because people couldn't handle, or at
See,
least
that's
people back in 1995 couldn't handle them.
that's
Odds are, if they got released today, we would have been like, Saw did that. We don't care. We've seen this. Been there, done it, kind of thing. But back then, it was kind of like the original thing that John Carpenter released when he put that forward to test audiences. They had the same reaction. They were like, "This is terrible. This is horrible. This is horrific. Nauseating kind of thing." He made the decision that in order to be able to get it released in the theater with an R rating to get it past the censors, he changed absolutely nothing, and then released it as is.
Nick, you look like you've been wanting to say something for the past 2.5 minutes.
This is legitimately concerning that there was a more disturbing version. That this was the less disturbing version, because at 2 points in this movie, I was like, "Wow, I am not enjoying this." In the sense of because first off, there was the scene where the young guy, the kid, the baby bear, where
Justin, yeah,
this is more of just on a personal level, but where he was just having a seizure. I was thinking to myself, wow, I can't watch a movie with people having seizures in it just because of my line of work and having just today worked with a patient.
I saw that.
So that's more of a that's not necessarily disturbing, but out of the middle of nowhere having an a straight up suicide on camera, where it's what's her name just slashes her wrists. That took me a little too far.
No, I understand that. I mean,
but
for
that I'm trying to find specifically what I wrote.
His wife in the bathtub there.
Yeah, that was. Oh, I wrote Jesus. That was fucked up to watch. Parentheses suicide to remind myself what was fucked up to watch.
Yeah, I mean, because for me, the excessive blood and the sort of the gruesome, grotesque imagery didn't really bother me that much, because I've seen stuff like Cannibal Holocaust, Salò, or the 120 Days of Sodom, and Boku no Pico. God. So I'm basically
wait. How did you just go from that, from Salò to Boku? Because I've been subjected to both of those. I could never in my life make that connection.
No, because we're just
so beautiful. It was a beautiful dance of disturbing right there.
Yeah,
that was great.
That's the point, is that it's like disturbing content in general, disturbing for different reasons. But I've seen a lot of stuff that is quite gut-wrenching in terms of the visual department or the sheer implication department. So I don't tend to get squeamish over that kind of stuff. But I mean, even so, I do sort of reach a point where I sort of realize, okay, this is just sort of being a little bit violent for violence sake, which is part of the reason why after a while just the excessive blood of Event Horizon was just it wasn't like it was hurting me. It was just like, okay, I sort of get it.
I think that's what helps about being cut down so much too. Is there probably was a lot more of that in terms of the disturbing factor, and from all accounts, the scene of the transmission there went on for a few minutes as opposed to the few seconds that it was on screen. So I can understand it if it was continuously playing like that. It'd get to the point where it's just like, please, guys, just shut this off. Please, we've seen enough.
Yeah. What were you going to say, Nick?
No, I was just looking for... what was I going to say?
I don't know.
It's not the blood. It's not the blood. It's not the blood that I have an issue with. I was it's the circumstance.
Yeah.
The disturb. I would not call blood disturbing.
Yeah.
That's not where I rank disturb. I'm talking about the mentally kind of disturbing, just straight up the ship showing him his wife just
okay,
out of the blue that was the circumstance that was what kind of threw me off a little bit. It wasn't necessarily the blood. I just wanted to...
All right, and then in that case, then I completely misinterpreted what you said, and then I just dropped Boku no Pico in the podcast for apparently no reason whatsoever.
That is disturbing in any context.
Any context is right.
Any.
But
context.
Also, if we're gonna sort of go back to
spoiler warning on Boku no Pico: do not look it up.
Do not
watch it.
Do not watch it.
Do not forget it was ever mentioned.
Anybody who says that you should watch Boku no Pico is not your friend and should be reported to authorities immediately.
Exactly.
Yeah. Anyway,
Immediately unfriend them, disappear from their life.
more or less.
Pretend like if you see them on the street, cross the street and go down the other side of the block.
Well, because and also to go back to something we talked about before about sometimes characters just sort of getting a bizarre case of stupid at the weirdest moments. There's in the scene with Miller and Weir fighting in the core room. And you see Weir with all of those weird cuts that he has after his eyes have been gouged out. And he's basically like sewn them shut. At least that's what it looked like. and he's like, hello.
This is the Hellraiser part of the movie.
Yeah,
at that
he's just
point.
like, hello,
he's
Captain
turned
Miller.
into a Cenobite at that point.
Yeah, he just says like the creepy hello, Captain Miller, and then Captain Miller's like, what did you do to your eyes? It's like, that's what you're asking. In this moment,
Yes,
with
some. I think it was also the line delivery. There were some line delivery issues with this movie.
oh,
I love Lawrence Fishburne. I love him, but there were some lines where I was like, "Are you sure you wanted to say it like that?"
They were a little over dramatic.
Yeah.
I'll give
Or
them
like
that. This was even pre-Matrix Lawrence Fishburne. I think it's sometime after he stopped being Larry Fishburne, started being Lawrence, and before the Matrix came out. So I think he was still finding his feet in terms of dramatic acting.
Well, I mean, also just to mention as a side note, I wrote down literally the fifth thing I wrote was steampunk spaceship with Lawrence Fishburne and going to sleep machines or whatever. I was like, okay, this is very Matrixy, but this is far before the Matrix. So I just drew that similarity. But
Which if you
going
can't
back,
tell from the CGI in this movie that it was pre-Matrix.
The CGI has aged so badly. Oh my god!
Rewatching this, I'm sorry, it really was bad.
I didn't take an issue. I'm pretty good about setting aside decade limitations or era limitations. But I think when it comes to the line delivery issues that I was having, it was mainly with intense emotions where I feel they weren't genuine. They were just yelling for the sake of yelling.
Or even
there was the first time that the doctor, whatever his name was,
Weird.
Where he has the first glimpse of the flashback in which he sees his wife without the eyes and everything. And in that moment, the scream that he gave, it was just, oh.
Yeah, it was a little unnatural.
Yeah, or either that, or when after the lady who was chasing after her son then falls back into the core room and dies. When Weir goes to see her, he's like, oh.
It reminded me a lot of the old movies, back from the 40s, and when it was more of a theatrical production.
Mm-hmm.
And it was almost like they were hearkening back to an entire different era for the acting.
Yeah.
For half of it. The other half was almost too subtle. You've got the character of DJ, who the ship's mechanic guy.
Mm-hmm.
Which I'm sorry, I loved that guy.
He just randomly starts attacking Weir just in the infirmary. He's like, no, you gotta stop. Okay. No, you gotta stop.
I would totally do the same thing though. Drake's here to kill us.
We're
gonna die. I'm gonna take you down first. Which, in all honesty, if they had let him just do that, they would have solved a whole bunch of problems. They had just let him kill Weir right there.
They absolutely would have.
But I think one of my favorite moments with him though is when he discovers Weir has put a bomb on the ship. And he's like, no, I put this thing back together, and he's tearing it apart, and he finally discovers the thing. And he's like, I don't have time to disarm this. He just quietly accepts it with almost a sort of dignified death.
He just sort of puts his head down, just like, well, I wasn't expecting this to happen today.
Yeah, just like the Price is Right sound effect in the back, the boom, 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 boom.
Wow. No, you know what? I would love it if somebody took that clip, put it on YouTube, and then put that sound effect over it. I would put that in my favorites list right away.
Wah, wah, wah.
Also, I mean, Weir's fascination with his wife is super creepy because, like, the very first scene that we see of him is when he's waking up, and then he looks over and he has this table with about like 90 pictures of his wife. Like, I understand like grieving, I totally get it, but 90 pictures? Like, is that really necessary?
Maybe it was like a little shrine. I mean, he felt he had a lot of survivor's
Yeah.
guilt
It kind of
for
reminded
for
me.
driving her to the suicide.
It kind of reminded me of that one scene in that French film He Loves Me, He Loves Me Not, where the lady in the mental ward is obsessed with the doctor, and so she makes a mosaic of the doctor's likeness in the closet made of the pills that she was supposed to take. I was honestly expecting something like that to crop up in this, because it's like, if this is how we're getting introduced to him feeling about his wife, I can only just be afraid of what we're gonna do later.
I'd say you just describing that kind of reminded me of 1 Hour Photo with Robin Williams. You seen this one?
Wow, I haven't seen that one in a while.
With he's got a mosaic of the family he's kind of stalking on his wall, and it's like 3/4 of his wall is just photos of this completely other family. Like, obsessed much?
Oh my god. Oh jeez.
Laces out, Dan! Laces out!
I love also when most of the crew is dead, and then Captain Miller goes into the closet and basically pulls out like a version of a machine gun.
Oh, the ratchet gun there.
Yeah, the ratchet gun.
Yeah. Well, at least they managed to introduce that earlier with them trying to repair the ship. So
That's true,
it doesn't
yeah.
come completely out of the blue.
It doesn't come completely out of the blue, especially in a movie where a lot of things come out of the blue. And I'm sorry, but if you can open a black hole that can take you anywhere, why in God's name would you stick your finger in and like pull at the weird goo?
Because he's the youngest, most inexperienced person on the crew.
He's a fucking idiot.
He's never seen a black hole before. What would you do with him?
He's an idiot.
Listen, this is where Ridley Scott came up with the entire idea for Prometheus, right there. Just poking the black goo.
Oh god, there's just so many moments in this movie where people's IQ points just dive like 100 points.
Suddenly. But what the one part that's just the most anticlimactic moment with those kind of moments is when Miller calls the doctor and tells him, he's like, okay, look out for Weir, and he's sitting there like he picks up this bone saw. He's like, okay, if he comes along, I'm going to kill him, and immediately gets himself killed. I mean, he doesn't even end the phone call. Miller is still yelling for him.
He's like, "Are you there? Can you hear me?" It's like, can you not hear this like murder going on, like through the course of this?
I get that the ship is big. How much time did it take Weir to vivisect Lucius Malfoy, string him up, paint a bunch of symbols all over the room, and then leave quietly without being seen?
Unless, like, the weird black hole power core ship thing somehow gives him the ability to move at Mach speed as well. I think
at this point the ship is just sort of teleporting him where he needs to be.
Yeah.
He's become the omnipresent slasher in this movie, which compared to Sunshine is very much the way that kind of turned out as well.
See, that's why I was drawing so many similarities. Like, oh, come on, why was it the source?
Well,
but this was 20 years before Sunshine too, so you get the feeling that Danny like watched this movie and was like, I can do that better.
And they did.
They did.
Made much more sense. And it was like, I don't know. I just like the crux of just the anticlimactic, like, were just bizarre turns. And I wrote down specifically with Spunky Spaceman, I'm not sure if I like him or am annoyed by him, because this. Like, I'm going to steal from the YouTube channel popular CinemaSins. Like, earn that paycheck, Tyrese. He did that like 10 times where he earned that paycheck.
Well, the funny thing is, he actually, when the actor, when he got the lines, he complained that he was too stereotypically black for this thing. And they kept him that way. he, it is a little unfortunate, but he does kind of provide a little bit of comic relief in an otherwise very dark
which
movie.
is why I had that dilemma. Like, do you like him? Because I'm really enjoying this, but at the same time, I'm telling you, all the tension is just set back to zero.
Love the actor, hate the character.
I don't know. I kind of like the character. I gotta say, I enjoyed most of the characters in this movie.
Because
the one that just.
Yeah, Cooper's the one character in this I actually did like, mostly because his comedic moments just really gave me something to laugh about, and also, I mean, the very first bit of dialogue we get with him is when he's making that sex with a black man joke in the very beginning.
Would you like something hot and black inside you? How about some coffee then?
Just God damn it.
But it really does. It introduces you to the character that this is the comic relief and this is where he's going to stay. It does sort of flip the entire idea of the comic relief manages to survive the entire movie.
Yeah.
Usually this is the character that's and the fact that he's black.
Yeah.
He should have been dead first.
I loved that. I loved that so much.
In almost any other movie, he'd be either the first or second one to die.
Yeah.
And both of the black actors in this movie managed to survive to the end. Well, they did kill one of them off by the end with the heroic sacrifice.
Yeah.
But the other still managed to make it out relatively intact.
Yeah.
Nick, go.
Well, that's because this would lead what else do y'all want to say about Event Horizon? Because this specific
talking really does lead right into Cabin in the Woods, doesn't it?
Cabin in the Woods,
Yeah, well, because the last thing I really want to talk about with Event Horizon, then we can move on to Cabin in the Woods, is the ending. The ending of this movie, after what's his name, Miller's sacrifice, and then we're all okay. And then
how can you forget Miller's name? Because they only say it about 900 times in this movie.
Well,
especially at the end of the movie.
Well, I'm sorry, Tom. I'm sorry that apparently I don't meet your standards of recollection. And stop sending me Facebook messages. Oh my God. So there might be some beeps that are coming in throughout the course of just I
haven't heard a single one, so you're good.
That's nice. Well, it may come through on just my desktop audio, but anyway, was the ending with that really, really awful fake out of, oh wow, Weir survived, and then somehow got his eyes back, which was weird. And then they wake up, it's like, no, we're okay, and then the door just closes, and then that's it.
The last thing I wrote was
the ambiguous ending.
Yeah. Interesting cliffhanger? Question mark?
It does kind of leave it open. They blew up half the ship, half of it got sucked off into the black hole, but they're still in the ship. I mean, you've still got half a ship.
Yeah, and
did the evil leave with Weir?
Yeah, and maybe I'm just remembering this wrong, but weren't there sort of similar lights around that final closed door, sort of like the giant astrolabe of a core? That was
a little bit, yeah. It has that very circular look.
So I have no idea if that's supposed to intend that the presence on the ship is still there, or if it's something else entirely. Because I feel like if they really wanted to sort of make it a little bit more ambiguous about the ending, I feel like they would have left at least just one more really subtle clue. And I didn't pick up on anything. Because I thought to myself, and maybe it's just because it's a different ending, I thought to myself, okay, well that's an odd place to stop, I guess.
It does. It leaves you on a really ambiguous part. When you're saying it brought back Weir more or less intact with just a bunch of cuts on his body. At that point, it said to me that the ship brought him back as a hallucination, more or less. This is the ship's manifestation of itself in the form of Weir. How he had the hallucination of the crewman that he let burn. That he said he's like, I could feel the heat. He was there, and it was doing the same thing but with Weir.
Okay, I can
because
buy
it gives you. I mean, if you look at him, it gives him really superhuman strength and stuff afterwards to go tossing him around.
Like when Captain Miller starts beating him up with that giant, I think, CO2 canister, and then he's like, oh, that's cute.
Yeah. I mean, it was like taking on the Terminator at this point. But no, that was just, you forgetting Miller's name for a second just reminded me of the one thing that always bugged me about this movie is when he does break that window and they're all getting sucked out of the window and everybody is just yelling Miller the entire time. And it's just like, okay, we get it. His name is Miller. Everybody's trying to get his attention. Just yell something else. Please, anything else other than Miller for one line. Please. There was the one scene. It was like supposed to be this like tense scene, and about the third Miller in, I just started laughing.
I just love that phrase, the third Miller in. That's great. Nick, you looked like you wanted to say something for a minute.
No, I just have really reactive expressions. I don't. Yeah, I don't think I had anything else to say. I mean, like overall, it was an enjoyable movie. It was just the tone was inconsistent. Like
it was a little campy.
Yeah, which like again, perfect lead-in. How to do like campy meta humor correctly.
Mm-hmm. All right, before you go into it, I said to
That's
Nick
the second
earlier.
time you've tried to lead into Cabin in the Woods. The second time you've been
I have
rejected.
totally cut you off on this one. All right. The only reason I cut you off on this one is because I want to really throw a spoiler alert on this one. If you have not seen Cabin in the Woods before we start discussing this,
yeah,
please go watch Cabin in the Woods.
Yeah,
That's
go
fair.
away now.
Because I think everybody here can recommend this movie, but it's got a lot of things. If you have not heard what's going on, what happens in this movie, go watch it now. Come back, enjoy the rest of our podcast.
Which I will lead into this. Like when I encountered Cabin in the Woods, I knew nothing about it. I had never seen the trailer. It was already out on Netflix.
Same.
I only knew it by the image on Netflix. So my first viewing was completely blind, and that's how it should be.
Absolutely.
Like, don't watch reviews, don't watch like honest trailers or everything wrong with, or like, but like those are hilarious. They do a good job with it, but don't watch them before you watch a movie because it will be spoiled right off the bat.
I absolutely
don't even
agree
watch
with
the
that.
trailer for it because from what I hear, the trailer is really spoiler heavy too.
Yeah, I watched the trailer like just for a whim when I was renting these via YouTube, and like I watched it. I was like, oh my gosh, if I had seen this, the movie wouldn't have, the experience would not have been the same because I was just totally thrown for a loop with this movie. It went in a direction that I did not expect. It was a subject that I did not expect, which was amazing. That's one of the reasons why I still love this movie so much is because I have such vivid memories of watching it for the first time.
I wasn't expecting Sigourney Weaver.
Way to spoil it, jeez. Oh wait, no, we're past that part.
You gave like a 30-second spoiler alert. Don't you pull that on me.
It's important though. Like they need to go away. Go away.
By the end of Nick's work, we're way past it.
Yeah,
so
we're way past it.
Anyway, Cabin in the Woods.
Mm-hmm.
This was Nick's contribution to our little podcast tonight. Which, thank you. It was a wonderful movie that first impression when I remember when this came out in the theaters and vaguely hearing about it and hearing that it was different, that it wasn't your typical horror movie, but somehow I managed to avoid any spoilers or anything like about it because it got really delayed released. It got filmed in 2010, never hit theaters till 2012 for various reasons. So even like Chris Hemsworth, the lead guy, he became sort of a retroactive recognition on this because by then Thor had come out and his entire audition for Thor, they gave him a callback because of this movie, because of some of the dailies from this movie. So even though this came out afterwards, so it kind of like it became a dead star walking moment for him because you didn't think okay, well, he's the main character of this other big blockbuster movie and he's the second one dead.
Something like that. I mean, the phrase on TV tropes development hell was coined for movies like this.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Exactly. Like it got bounced around because the studio went bankrupt or something. It got sold to somebody else, and it almost didn't even see the light of day, despite the pedigree from the two people that wrote it. The one guy, you got Josh Whedon, who's known for everything, and then you got the other guy
Pretty much.
who helped pen Cloverfield, who wound up directing it. No, Josh Whedon did not direct this movie. It was the other guy whose name I can't remember. It was a Nightmare on Elm Street or not Elm Street, the Nightmare Before Christmas moment. Tim Burton did not direct that either. Sorry to spoil that for everybody else there.
Yeah,
that's true.
It is true, but because my first impression when I was watching Cabin in the Woods, because this was the first time that I had seen it, was specifically for this, and I mean, just like any movie that I watch, I try to go in with as little of an impression of it as possible, just that way it can happen as organically as possible, if you want to use the word organically for that purpose. The first thing that I thought of as I was watching this was it kind of reminded me of Zombeavers with its ridiculous level of self-referential horror tropes. And what, you don't know Zombeavers?
I've seen it.
What?
Zombeavers. Zombeavers. Zombeavers.
It's so horrible.
It's so awful.
It's like G-grade horror. It's great. I don't even know if it made it onto the Sci-Fi channel, if it was just direct to video.
We can't fight amongst ourselves. That's what the beavers would want.
I mean, on a scale from 0 to Sharknado 5, what are we talking here?
Oh, I don't know. I haven't seen the 5th one. We've only made it through the first 3.
See, because
that was just a joke. Like, Sharknado in general, I'm assuming it's of similar quality.
Oh, it might be worse.
See, because Sharknado at this point has become a meme unto itself. Whereas Zombeavers was trying to do the sort of self-referential horror stuff that Cabin in the Woods was doing, only it didn't do it nearly as well. Mostly because I actually liked the characters in Cabin in the Woods. I didn't care about... Okay, except for the weird trucker guy. I liked him in Zombeavers, but that was about it.
I don't even think I finished Zombeavers to remember the trucker guy.
No, because
to be truth be told.
Yeah, because what I loved about Cabin in the Woods was, again, like, you can so clearly tell that it's playing to all these ridiculous tropes of the horror film, like, you know, like the emphasis of, like, you know, who's gotten laid amongst all the cast members, so you can predict who's probably going to get killed, or, you know, the creepy guy who lives in the shack who tells them about the creepy house. But what I love is the fact that it's the entire background surrounding all of that, and the weird mastermind style, like, control room that makes it all so much fun and makes it so much funnier than Zombeavers. Because it's like, I told them. It's like, I told them to do that. Like, well, so now what?
It was a lot of meta sort of thing going on. It was like they were filming. It was like they were creating a horror movie inside this horror movie. Like they had to have the typical. They had to have the jock. They had to have the fool, the whore.
Yeah.
The virgin and the scholar.
Yeah.
But they took all the people that, you know, they got this group of 5, and they took all the wrong roles for them and forced them onto different people.
Yeah.
Like they took the smartest guy in the group and tried to make him the dumb jock. They took the jock, who was not unintelligent, and made him the scholar. And then you took the one girl who's devoted to her boyfriend and made her the whore. You took the virgin who's having a fling with her professor.
I loved that.
And then the only one that fit his stereotype right off from the bat was the fool, who was the stoner. And in the end, he became the hero
with the bong coffee cup.
He was my favorite character, and I don't want to hear any side marks about that. Like, he was my favorite character.
Yeah, whoever was the person in the prop department who made that bong coffee cup, I really hope that they got a raise for that, because that was one of the, like, of all, like, when I think of, like, iconic horror movie images, like Michael Myers, like the knife on the poster for Halloween, or things like that. Or for what it's worth, the weird stick figure in the Blair Witch Project. I will remember the bong coffee cup so fondly as a horror movie item.
I will tell you, like, people who engage in the greenery are often wonderful engineers and innovators. And I will leave it at that.
I believe that.
I would readily believe that. Yeah.
I would.
So, like
you
I
get
was,
very creative when you're
yeah, I was the
when
one
you're
that
baked
like,
as an apple pie. I mean,
yeah. Anyway, I was the one that brought this. Like this was my choice for the selection.
Yeah.
And like the thing that probably the best thing I love about this is like I of course love the self-referential meta humor. Like I love that kind of humor, and the thing is they were able to have their cake and eat it too in the way that they were able to essentially create something like say any of the scary movies or like the parody movies where they have like making a joke of itself. They were able to successfully have that movie in an actual horror movie. Like they were able to balance it perfectly, where they had those moments of self-referentialism. Particularly, one of my favorites is the whole split up versus not split up like moment where all of a sudden Hemsworth is like, actually, we should split up. And the other guy's like, yeah, we do. And the stoner's just like, really?
What is wrong with you people?
And
yeah,
like,
no, I realized about partway into this, we were watching a Scooby-Doo movie without the dog.
That is perfect. That is, oh my god.
And really, they're looking for the man behind the mask in this, and it turns out to be Sigourney Weaver, but
Old Lady Weaver.
but it really is. I mean, this entire movie really is like a Scooby-Doo movie that has gone off the rails.
Oh my god, that's amazing. Well, if you want to get specific, Scooby-Doo on Zombie Island, just because they're zombies, but oh well.
Right. And I love that my favorite parts of this were the betting pool, where
that was funny.
The betting pool, and then the two guys that I can't remember their names, but I'm gonna call them Stanler and Waldorf, because it's more or less what they were for this entire movie. They were the most, for me, they were me in any sort of horror movie, watching a horror movie with these two guys going through, and you can tell that this was like Whedon's, and the other guys are writing, that they want to make something unique, truly unique, by the way that they come across with these two guys. Like the one guy who really wants to see a mermaid, but knows that the only thing that's going to get made is another zombie movie.
And then end.
And that's the betting pool. It's like Maintenance won last year with the exact same thing.
Yeah.
But then has to split it with the intern, who's very excited about winning. I'm the intern.
And then then the merman comes and he's just like, oh god, damn it.
Did you catch it in the background in the monitors with the intern he's trying to escape something, and he's got this sign up to the monitor, send help, and he flips it around, I'm the intern.
Yeah, I saw that. That was awesome.
I actually don't think I've seen that. I did.
Give it a rewatch. You'll catch that. And the shout outs to so many different horror movies in this thing were just incredible. I mean, they took every single horror movie, threw it in here, and I love that they just gave them time to just run amok.
Oh, the end. It was so much fun. It was like you threw all the horror movies in a blender, took the best elements out of most of them, and kept some of the schlock in for comedic effect, and you made Cabin in the Woods.
Exactly. Like they were able to keep the comedy, like the comedic elements of like horror movies, but still have it be scary.
Yeah.
Like it was legitimately like even though all these tropes were playing out and they were referring themselves to the tropes, like the fact of the matter was that the horror was still horror.
Yeah.
They constructed it as as a horror movie and shot it as a horror movie.
See, because
yeah, go for it.
Yeah, sorry. I'm sorry to cut you off, because here's the thing. I didn't really start, and this is maybe one of the, like, if I had to, like, sort of do, like, be a little bit of a devil's advocate and maybe pick out a negative, it was that I didn't, is that, what?
How dare you?
It's that I didn't really, like, get the horror element feeling until they went into the elevator, because I was able to go along with the fact that it's doing all the self-referential stuff and it's all a lot of fun, but I wasn't really starting to feel, like, on edge for anything until they start going into the facility.
Really?
You know what? I'm gonna back.
Zombie family didn't spook you?
No, the zombie family didn't scare me very much.
I'm actually going to back him up on this one. It had far too much predictability, and that was exactly the point of the movie.
And it was
right
fun.
Up until
it was fun.
Right. I mean, it was great. It was great to watch. They played it very well, and there was a great balance between the control room scenes and the other thing, and it was some very tense moments, and all the tense moments really came out of the control room because you wanted to see why these guys were controlling this thing. Like with the one of the most exciting moments for me anyway was when the bridge didn't, or the tunnel didn't collapse, and you got this guy burning down the hallway trying to get, it was like, okay, are they going to get out? Are they going to make it? Are they, And at the other end, you've got this guy who's like, no, they can't leave yet, guys. They can't leave, And it gave, and it, and it was a couple little subtle hints throughout that the stoner guy didn't die right away when he did, like when
when like the daughter
when they pull the lever for him, and all of a sudden, the downstairs starts going crazy. Like, oh, they must be really excited. They didn't do that for anybody else. It was kind of like the downstairs going like, oh, hey, hey, you guys, you screwed up. Come on, get it right. And then,
I didn't know either.
And then when he says me, he gets down to the demolitions guy, and they're like, I don't know, there's a power surge from upstairs. It's the stoner dude sitting there. He's been screwing around in the elevator trying to get work, and he's sending shorts down throughout the system, and he's shorting out things. So it's giving you little hints that something's not right playing out in the scenario upstairs for these guys, but they're not paying enough attention to their job, and so
yeah, and also
everything's about to go wrong.
Yeah, speaking of things going wrong, or in this case going right. I mean, we knew that the character who's playing the jock is going to get killed just because it's still a horror movie. And when he's doing the epic motorcycle jump to try and get across the pond, I mean, I knew that he obviously wasn't going to make it. I figured that he would probably crash into that barrier that they set up. What I didn't expect was for it to happen to him so quickly.
Oh, I love the epic swelling music. Like, hey, he's gonna make this across, and all of a sudden, just bang.
But what I also love is that like the swelling music didn't even really have the chance to really get swelling because it's just
didn't
like
get that crescendo. He hit the wall, and the music stopped.
It was so great. I love that. Was probably my favorite death in the whole movie. Was that one just because of how quickly it happened.
I was the one thing this is my rewatch for me that I didn't really catch the first time is the eagle that hits the fence in the opening scene. I know they put it there so that it's kind of like a Chekhov's gun. They can't pull the big net out of their ass later that he hits, but at the same time it kind of spoils that moment unless you've completely forgotten about that moment because they show it so early in the film, and you're still laughing from this Mordecai guy who. The old caretaker of the thing. Which can we mention the speakerphone on this? The bathe in the blood of the. Am I on speakerphone?
That was my favorite moment of the whole movie.
They're like, oh wait, hang on, and then he still goes, I'm still on speakerphone, aren't I? And they can't contain it. They just roll,
and they can't control their. Oh my god! Like I loved that so much. That was so funny.
The humor in this movie is so well written, and it's so well done to balance out the horror from it, especially the last 20 minutes, after the elevator ride, where there really isn't a whole lot of humor other than the really darkly humorous moment of the merman. And which I've always wanted to see a merman. Yeah. And he looks at it crawling towards it. He's got that look. Are you kidding me?
Like, this is how it's gonna end. Death by merman.
At least he finally got to see the merman.
He finally did get to see the merman. Yeah.
If you get a chance, watch the behind the scenes of of making the monsters, and especially the one where they do the merman scene, because I've watched this, and they talk about the way that the blood is blowing out the blowhole, which is already kind of ridiculous, and it kind of cuts away a little bit. But if you watch the behind the scenes of them making this, they're talking about, they're like, well, it was just a ridiculous amount of blood, and it didn't stop. And then it shows them filming this, and literally, like, I don't know how much blood they must have pumped through this blowhole, but it's got to be on the range of like 10 gallons worth
It's like it must
of
have gone on
blood
for like 10
outside.
minutes or something like that.
Went on for a good 30 seconds or so, just blowing blood. It looked like a Quentin Tarantino film by the end of it.
God.
It was so it was almost more funny watching it afterwards of that, just seeing how badly it could have turned out, but how well it did in the final cut.
Yeah. Oh man, that was just there's just so many brilliant moments, and it's like when they're going down into the cellar in the basement, and she gets the book and she starts reading it, and the fool's just like, "Why are you reading this?
Right?
Like, why are you
The
still
smart
reading
guy,
this?"
stop reading that. Why we should leave immediately. Really, it's like the guy that's supposed to be the fool winds up being the smartest one in the movie.
Exactly. That's what
It
makes
really
it so funny.
plays against all your expectations of a horror movie.
The weed head is the only one who has his head on his shoulders.
And I do love the little shout outs in this movie. Like the cabin is straight out of The Evil Dead. Like to the point where I think they had to have reconstructed it.
I
If they
honestly
didn't
would
find
not be
the
surprised.
original.
Yeah.
If they didn't find the original, they reconstructed it beautifully to look like it. And then you got all the other little shout outs and like speaking of Hellraiser from the last movie, you've got the Cenobite looking thing with the saw blades in his head in this one.
Well, I mean, they also have like the scene by the lake, which of course is like Friday the 13th and all that. Wait, no. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes,
Friday
Yeah,
the 13th. Yeah.
Like, am I mixing up
like,
my Elm Street? No.
I think Elm Street might have been the only one they didn't reference into this one
Yeah,
really very well.
I feel like if they were going to reference Nightmare on Elm Street,
Shining.
yeah, I feel like if they were going to reference Nightmare on Elm Street, they would have made a little bit more of an effort to be overt about it. Because as I'm watching this, I'm going through all of the classic horror flicks in my head, and I'm thinking to myself, like, where's Nightmare on Elm Street?
They didn't have him. They didn't really even have Voorhees. The closest they had, maybe I guess, was the killer redneck torture family.
Yeah, I mean,
which
I
I
mean,
guess
I-
sort of fits the Voorhees.
Yeah, I mean,
Well, I mean,
I sort
also
of fit. Oh,
the father, I think, stood up in the water at that very end,
yeah,
just to show that he was still alive.
yeah.
But
Yeah, I
then
guess that kind of gives it a little bit of the Friday the 13th vibe on that.
Yeah, for
Yeah.
me, it was the set. It was the fact that it looked like a campsite setting that reminded me of Friday the 13th, rather than an overt reference to Jason Voorhees.
Right. I mean, it kind of get all the different horror movies of going into the woods and having something bad happen. I mean, all the way back to like Deliverance, I guess, and then you could
Which is many of them.
a lot of horror seems to happen in the middle of the woods. Does some horrible things. But,
It's just so much fun
yeah.
going through the mental gymnastics of trying to figure out just what it is that they're messing with, because when you realize what it is that they're either referencing or making fun of, you just sort of sit back. It's like, yeah, I figured that out, and it's like it's a film that really rewards the viewer who is well versed in horror flicks. I mean, it's true that even if you don't like horror movies, you'll either be able to pick up some of the references here, or at the very least get a few hearty laughs out of it. But I mean, it's in a way a love letter to people who love horror movies and are also fully aware of many of their problems.
I do like the way they show that other countries are doing the same thing. Like
Japan.
you've got the Norway one. It looks like it looks straight out of the base at the end of The Thing. Like this went wrong. Like they didn't manage to kill everybody off. The thing didn't get released and contained. Then you've got Japan. How hard is it to kill a bunch of 9-year-olds?
I love the Japan scene where they just end up like sending the ghost back to hell or whatever.
It's a happy frog.
It was like Ghostbusters, except instead of proton packs, you had singing.
Oh my god! Yeah, that was so great. I love the guy's reaction. I mean, would be if anybody in that movie that I related to was the old bald guy. Which,
Oh, yeah.
being an old bald guy, I have the exact same reactions to things when they don't go right.
You are not old. Stop it.
I am bald though.
Yeah, bald does not equate to old, man.
They do have some of the. I think they do give some of the best lines to those pairs though. Like
Oh,
where
yeah.
they're sitting there. They're the two of them wander off into the woods, and they're supposed to be trying to disrobe the girl, and the one guy kicks them all out. He's like, your base needs disgust me. And then they sit there and just like, all right, we're gonna watch this again. I mean, they almost look bored.
Yeah, their chemistry is so great.
Oh, absolutely.
Like it's the kind of chemistry where you could have them like read the phone book and it would still be funny.
They reminded me like a Stadler and Wardorf, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was a very apt comparison.
That was a very apt comparison. Yeah. My God, just this movie was so much fun. I don't even remember the last time I had that much fun watching a horror movie.
You know, the closest one that I can compare it to in terms of whole plot reference would be a Clive Barker movie called The Midnight Meat Train.
I've heard of that. I haven't seen it though.
Which, yeah, from the look you're giving me, you haven't seen this one either. But it's essentially it's a subway in New York where this Bradley Cooper is actually the main guy.
Wow.
Yeah. He's a reporter, and he kind of stumbles on this story of like these people disappearing in the underground late night thing. So he goes down, and I can't remember the guy who plays the butcher down there, but do you remember like Gone in 60 Seconds at all? The Nicolas Cage one, the guy that plays Sphinx on there, the guy that never talks.
Oh wow, okay.
Right, he's a soccer player that made a transition into film, but so he's butchering these people, and it turns out that the subway is taking them to an underground lair full of creatures that they're satiating their need for human flesh to try to keep them subdued so that they don't come out and suddenly take over the world. You know, I'm like, oh my God. Well, the first time I watched that, I'd seen the Meat Train before this, and I'm like, it's vaguely familiar, but on the other hand, it's much better.
Also, I mean, one other thing I want to talk about is like the very, very ending of this movie. Just after, after an episode of Sigourney Explains It All, when you've got, like they're just sitting there in this creepy temple thing, and it's like, well, I mean, I could die and save all of humanity, or we could just like sit here and smoke a joint. I thought that was so funny.
Like maybe we should just start over. And it is a little bit almost like of a meta sense of like maybe horror movies need to start finding a new direction to take themselves in.
Yeah.
I mean, like the entire ending sequence, like I am fully open about this, and I mentioned it in the Event Horizon notes about this. Like, I'm kind of a bitch when it comes to like every character dying in a horror movie. I want someone to live, so like this ending is real tough for me because like, oh, everyone dies, gosh darn it, there's no hope. But like, it was such an intimate like display, like a very real display where hey, it wasn't like they were trying to shoehorn in like a last minute romantic relationship or anything like that. It was literally just them holding each other, like holding each other's hands as like getting stoned with a joint, and
there were just a couple of friends they had found a friend for the end of the world.
That was like such a beautiful display of friendship, and like it was a good ending. I hated it tore my heart apart, but it was a good ending.
Yeah, and it's interesting you say that like everybody dies, because if that implies that these old gods are rising up from the bottom, everybody is going to die. It's not just the people at the cabin; they're going for the rest of the world.
Yeah, they're all getting dead. Because the fact that everybody died in this movie for me was actually quite refreshing, because as somebody who has actually seen every single one of the Halloween movies, and every single one of the Friday the 13th movies and things like that, it was refreshing that they didn't actually have a quote-unquote final girl or anything like that in this. I like the fact that it's like, you know what, we're gonna thwart this last expectation that you had, and we're gonna go full on throttle, end of everything, gigantic hand, just
right?
crushing everything. I loved that. I loved the fact that it did something so radically different with the ending.
It really was the perfect ending to this movie for the satirical take it took on horror genre. Considering they played with the final girl moments through the entire movie, trying to force her into that role, even when like in the background where they're celebrating, hey, we did it, and you see up on the monitor she's getting mauled to death by the zombie guy, father.
That was so awesome. That was so awesome.
And it was so well done too, because again, it was one of those movies where you're paying attention to the people in the foreground, and the important stuff is happening in the back.
It's so great.
And then he comes to the rescue with the giant bong.
This was such a, for me again, because this was my first time seeing it. This was such a great delight, seeing this for the first time, and especially because I don't tend to gravitate towards horror-oriented movies just because I find a lot of the concepts just to start getting recycled too much, kind of like romantic comedies. This was such a nice breath of fresh air. So I want to thank you, Nick, for recommending this as the movie that we watched today. I will definitely bear this one in mind for either future recommendations for people or for my own personal aesthetic pleasure.
It's just such a delight. It is a delightful movie. It is an enjoyable experience. Even with its flaws, it's still an enjoyable experience to watch. Which I love movies like that, where even if it's not perfect, because I mean, what movie is perfect? But it's still an experience and an enjoyable experience to watch.
The Princess Bride is not perfect, Tom.
You know what? If you want another movie like this, I'm going to throw this out as a recommendation that, I don't know if you've seen this. Find a movie called Slither.
Slither, yes.
With Nathan Fallon, and I can't for the life. James Gunn directed it. The same guy that wound up doing the Guardians of the Galaxy movies.
Right.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
This was like one of his earlier movies. It'd be kind of like the way that Peter Jackson wound up falling into the Lord of the Rings after he did Brain Dead. He did an over-the-top horror movie and then wound up falling into this gigantic franchise. But this movie really, that one really lets him cut loose, and it's great because it's kind of like a horror comedy, and it really plays with a lot of the character types in that, and subverts your expectations for the end of the movie.
I just haven't seen Slither in a while, so yeah.
But you have seen it.
I have, yes.
I have not, so I will excitedly look that up.
Do so.
Oh my god. So, any final thoughts or things you wanted to discuss about Cabin in the Woods?
I think we've covered most of everything that I wanted to talk about for that one, and somehow we did this in a shorter time than we did the other three.
How the hell did that happen? You know why?
No, I think because we didn't cover Halloween so much. Halloween has been talked about so much, and everybody knows it. And
that is true.
It is still such a great movie, though.
Yeah.
But
well, I would say just this is something I didn't say before, but with Halloween, the original Halloween, one of the best things that I like about it is the fact of it just loves Halloween so much. Shots, some of the shots they use, especially earlier on in the film, of the town, of the trick-or-treaters, it just was a love letter to Halloween.
Yeah, it really
was so beautiful, and I just love the aesthetic of it.
It embodied the spirit of the holiday so lovingly that you could just sort of become more immersed in its atmosphere because of that.
Oh, absolutely. I like that it was small town USA kind of thing. I mean, it was since it was one of the first slasher films, it kind of established that as, where terror happens as opposed to Jason Takes Manhattan, which happened in Vancouver.
When he kicks the boombox. Oh my god.
When he punches a guy's head off. I mean, considering I don't think any of that movie actually took place in Manhattan, but it established so much of the genre to come in terms of how slasher movies would be made over the next 40 years.
Absolutely, yeah.
And they're still making them like that.
They really are, yeah. Even so, after all this time.
It's probably my own experience. There's two connections that I have, particularly with like this small town portrait of Halloween. One is the fact that I grew up in a town exactly like that, if not even smaller. Like it would Halloween, like that image of just walking down our like few blocks, like or the fact that I lived out even further, like from the actual town and in the middle of the woods, so it was just our road. That was trick or treating until I got old enough to be allowed to like go with my friends and in town and boy, make them bank on candy out
Yep.
there. But like, there's that like that image of Halloween. That is my Halloween, in which it vibes completely well with this, and also the fact that both me and William went to Potsdam, which has the Elm Street, that Friday the 13th was based off of, and like it is again a very small like typical upstate New York town. Like it's a village, and like it's just so much like nostalgia
You
associated.
put
And
the perfect word on it, nostalgia.
yeah,
The genuinely great horror movies, or at least the genuinely great Halloween, relies much more heavily on your own personal nostalgia of Halloween to really absorb you in its world. And it's just what's also just a testament to how great it is by countering those warm memories with the psychotic killer. Like, and it does the transition so seamlessly too, because it starts off at sun up, and you do get the feeling of the day going on and the sun going down, and like it effectively begins proper. So yeah.
No, yeah, that's one thing I liked about it. I mean, it's kind of like set in any town USA. I mean, I guess what it was supposed to be, Illinois, maybe,
Yeah.
whatever the name of the town was. That I
Haddonfield,
can't.
yeah.
Thank you. But yeah, it's like having driven around all over the state for my job into these little towns and stuff. They're scattered all over the place. You could set this movie almost anywhere outside of a major metropolitan area, and it works.
That's
I
what
think
Jason Takes
that's
Manhattan is for.
Jason takes Vancouver. What?
What are you doing, A?
You can't tell me that movie was. I think most of that movie was actually filmed in Vancouver, and that's the worst part of it.
Yeah, I think it was. Yeah, but
Which part of New York City were you going to show? The dark back alleyways that show nothing of the New York City skyline. Which I guess you can kind of have. It has that in its favor, is that every other movie what New York City looks like. That one you don't know.
no,
Could look like anything.
I mean, if you're trying to show back alleys of New York City, don't pick Manhattan because all the buildings are so close together. You gotta pick like the Bronx or Queens or something like that. They couldn't
Can
even
you
get that right.
No, that'd be like Leprechaun in the Hood.
Oh my
Now,
God.
before he goes back to the hood.
Back to the Hood.
Yeah,
Yes.
back to the hood.
The Hood.
Oh God, wonderful memories of watching the first Leprechaun, that first Halloween in Potsdam with Ryan. Actually, that was great. But
I haven't. I don't think I've actually watched any of those.
oh,
Oh,
Honestly,
you gotta watch the first.
you gotta
that's
watch
one
the first one.
franchise that I have not made it through.
It's got Jennifer Aniston in it. You have to watch the first one.
Well, I mean, Child's Play has Brad Dourif as Chucky, but it doesn't mean I want to go back just because I liked him in Lord of the Rings.
Hey, Child's Play is halfway decent. It's not great, but it's halfway decent.
It's kind of an Event Horizon kind of movie.
All right. So, any final thoughts before we sort of do our final summations of everything?
Nothing that I've got specific.
Alrighty. So, I guess if we're going to do the typical final rankings, I would, in case it hasn't been obvious from our discussions, I would put Halloween and Cabin in the Woods on relatively equal ground for completely different reasons. Halloween not just because of what it did for the horror genre, but also because it has aged remarkably well in terms of its horror. Cabin in the Woods for its amazing blend of being able to scare you, though again I sort of have reservations about how much it scares me in the first half, but also just being a gigantic love letter to the horror genre as a whole, especially the slasher subgenre of that. Event Horizon, I'm much more on the fence about, but I would still say it's worth seeing at least once.
You know what? I will if I'm gonna rank these, I would say see Halloween first, just to kind of get into the mentality of the horror things. Watch Cabin in the Woods second, and if you're still listening and you haven't watched Cabin in the Woods, shame on you for not taking our advice, because we probably spoiled everything up to the elevators opening up and the bloodbath starting.
Yeah, we were remarkably not detailed in that part of our...
How did we not talk about that when the elevators opened up and all the guards are standing there? You know what? I am going to be more specific for a second here. This was such a great moment where all the the security guards are sitting there, and they've pressed the big red button that should have no business being in a place like that whatsoever. They press this button and they're standing there waiting, and the elevators all ding at the same time, and they open up, and it's just instant carnage. Instant.
It's just a giant clusterfuck. And it's not even
everything that can come out of the elevators, because they come back a second time and there's more carnage. And by the time that Patience comes down the elevator and it dings for the last time, the entire room looks like the scene out of The Shining with the blood spilling out of the elevators.
Yeah. Oh,
and in fact, I think one of the elevators did do that. It opened up and it was just blood. Just burst out of this elevator to just fill this room with even more blood. The room was spick and span, sterling clean, and by the end of it, it was literally painted red.
If it wasn't for the "I'm on speakerphone" moment, that would be my favorite moment of the whole entire movie.
Oh my God! You know, I'll go with you on that one, because that was such a brilliant moment where it was just this great tense moment with the guy standing there with the guns, like, what's about to happen? What's about to happen? Carnage. It doesn't even hesitate. It's not a slow build up to the carnage.
It's just
immediate.
The dam just broke.
It was brilliantly done. So, anyway, Cabin in the Woods after Halloween. Shame on you for listening to all this and getting that spoiled for you as well. Lastly, I will go with Event Horizon, which is one of those weird movies that, again, it had a lot of potential going for it. It could have been so much more and so much better, but I think it was kind of like one of those directors that he's capable, but he's not brilliant. Kind of like how Mortal Kombat turned out.
Yeah, more or less. I'm basically in full agreement with you. Nick, how about you?
Okay, so I didn't even know that we were going to be ranking these, but that's cool. I dig it. So,
on the spot.
That's fine. I mean, it's hard because these three movies are, yes, they're all technically within the horror genre, but each are a different type of movie. Like, it, particularly just with the top two, which, I mean, I'm with you guys, the Halloween and Cabin in the Woods. They're different movies. Like, one is horror comedy, which that, like, if I'm in the mood for that, I'm going to go to Cabin in the Woods. One is a classic, like the classic slasher film, which, like, is good for a good spook. It was the first scary movie I actively sought out. Growing up, that was the first one I was like, I want to watch this movie. It has, like, that is how I'm going to see this movie for the rest of my life. That is that is what I associate it with. And Event Horizon is like this weird subgenre, but there is a subgenre of like sci-fi horror or sci-fi thriller. Mm-hmm. And like, as weird as it was with the tone and like the kind of schizophrenic moments or like quelled like climaxes or like foiled climaxes, whatever, it's still an enjoyable movie to watch. I enjoyed it a lot. I laughed a lot at the campiness. I love Funky Spaceman. Funky Spaceman. And like Morpheus just getting fed up with everything. Like, where at some point I'm pretty sure he just said, "Fuck this ship." Like,
no, that was a direct quote.
Yeah.
Like, it was. I'm glad that I watched it. I think it is a fine movie if you want to like watch something that will be entertaining. Again, I'm all about like entertainment as an experience to watch a movie. It is far from perfect. It is the most, I would say, most flawed movie out of our three here today, but it is still heck of a movie to watch. Like, I enjoyed it a lot.
Yeah. So I guess just sort of at the end of the day, I didn't happen to enjoy Event Horizon nearly as much as you guys did, but I still was glad that I saw it. I'm glad that I have that in my just movie oeuvre of sorts now. So I mean, I guess
I will say this: if it's got going for you, if you have any reason to want to watch it, and if you really love Harry Potter and hate Lucius Malfoy, watch this movie because you get to see Jason Isaacs get vivisected.
yes. I don't even have a witty follow up to that. Yes.
You get to see Malfoy get his comeuppance. It's great.
And see, like, vivisect, I did not know that was a word because didn't understand how to, like, write this in my notes, like, to write that scene.
That would be the word you're looking for.
They're looking for vivisect. Yep.
Gutted like an animal. Yes.
Yeah.
Vivisection. And everything inside removed and laid carefully on the table, and then paint the walls, and then stroll off before Miller shows up because apparently you have all the time in the world to gut a man, string him up, paint the walls, and leave.
More or less. Alrighty, so I guess that's basically where we're going to leave things off for this particular episode. We don't have a definitive plan about what we're going to do for our next one, but we'll talk about that, off broadcast. So, regardless of whenever you're watching this, we hope we were able to provide you with an interesting discussion. And until next time, I've been William.
I've been Tom.
And I've been Nick.
Have a good day, everyone.